Few interesting things coming out of Indiana Fever practice today. First being that Caitlin Clark was at practice. That's relatively significant. I mean, well, I guess it's not earth shattering. She's still a member of the team, but nonetheless, that she was even participating or doing anything in practice. She wasn't participating in practice, but she was indeed there getting some shots up, ball in hand, as it is said here in this post from Scott Agnes. A couple of different posts from practice that show Clark just putting up some shots. Obviously, nothing strenuous, but moving around on the basketball court, dribbling there. Doesn't seem to be limping significantly or favoring her leg to a great degree, as you see her talking to Dantas there with Lexi Hull off to the side. And I find this to be very encouraging. I'll get to that in just a second, but very, very encouraging. There was another piece of footage that was shared too, but this one by Tony East from Clark at practice, getting some shots up from the corner over there. You can see Keith Porter delivering the passes, and just some casual shots getting up from Caitlin Clark. Again, nothing strenuous, nothing crazy. But what do I take away from this video? My amateur analysis of this video is that CC is fine. Obviously, she's got an injury. She's dealing with an injury, but I get the sense that it is something she could have continued to play through, and that they are, as Stephanie White put it, trying to nip it in the bud before it becomes a bigger thing, before she pushes herself too hard, aggravates it worse, suffers a compensation injury, any of those things. I'm not, obviously a doctor. Let me preface it, but I know there's grades of the strain. I'm hopeful this means it's a grade 1 strain, which is a 1 to 2 week recovery, and they put the minimum of 2 weeks to make sure that she's completely right. That doesn't mean it's the case. She could perhaps be walking around gingerly with a grade 2 strain, but seeing her at practice, getting shots up, does make me believe that the injury is on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to severity and degree. And again, I talked about the schedule that the Fever have, but there could be no better time for this injury from a schedule standpoint and to hold Clark out of action because she can miss 2 weeks and only miss 4 games, all against winnable opponents. And she could miss 3 weeks and only miss 6 games, where some of those are going to be losses, of course, but a manageable amount of time and a manageable sequence of the schedule. And obviously, most important thing is to have Caitlin Clark right and ready to go when it comes to the stretch run and the playoffs. As far as what they do in the meantime, Stephanie White did announce who would be starting in Caitlin Clark's place, and that is the veteran Sydney Colson. Here's what White said, courtesy of Chloe Peterson from practice today about that.
Practices as trying to figure out new rotations, who's going to run point. Have you kind of nailed that down yet ahead of tomorrow?
Yeah, we're going to start setting point tomorrow. We're going to give that a look. Sophie's going to get a heavy dose of it as well. The other thing that we love is what Sophie and or Lexi, whichever one, brings us from the bench and having that spark, having that punch. So we're gonna look at Sid in that starting lineup to start.
So I think obviously Sophie Cunningham is the best equipped player, not to replicate what Caitlin Clark can do, but I do understand this line of thinking from the coach. Basically, Sydney Colson was brought in for guard depth. She's a veteran. She knows how to run a team. She knows how to defend her position. And she's not going to get lost out there. And what you do by starting her is you can keep all other things the same. My initial thought was start Sophie because Sophie is the better playmaker, the more dangerous player out on the floor. But if you're coach Stephanie White, you might be thinking, I want to keep and figure out my rotations, my lineups, what works the best together. So I want to keep it consistent, whether Clark is in or out. And with Clark out, we're just going to plug Colson in her place. Not to say that Sydney Colson can do what Caitlin Clark does. Of course she cannot. And it's not even going to be close to the same. But just to keep the rotations the same, the substitution patterns the same, I would expect Sophie Cunningham to close the game. I would expect as you could hear Coach allude to there, Lexi Hull and Cunningham to get heavy minutes, especially heavy minutes together on the floor. And I would expect that the Fever to play a much different style than one player bringing the ball up and making all these things happen. That's just not going to work. Obviously, none of their guards are talented enough to make that happen. I saw some encouraging reads from Kelsey Mitchell as a playmaker, making quick decisions with the basketball. I think that will be important for her to do, but they need her in attack mode as always. Obviously, I think you need quick decisions and quick handling motions from both Hull and Cunningham. They'll be relied upon to play make a little bit more. How you get Aaliyah Boston the ball is going to be a bit of an issue because I don't think they'll be running much pick and roll. And obviously, Boston was spoon-fed a lot of easy plays from Clark. That's not going to happen anymore, but Boston's off to such a strong start of the season and is such a strong passer herself. You have to figure out how to make her a key cog of the offense. Of course, the defense is going to adjust. They're going to try to double Boston and keep the ball out of her hands, and they're not going to allocate as many resources as they would to the perimeter. You would expect Boston and Mitchell to get the heaviest dose of the defensive attention. But I think you'll see a real heavy emphasis on the motion offense for the Indiana Fever in Caitlin Clark's absence. And like Coach Stephanie White said, Clark can view it from the sideline and get a different perspective in that regard. But to me, that's the thought process behind Sydney Colson starting in place of Caitlin Clark. And also my thought process on seeing Caitlin Clark at practice there is that it's encouraging. I don't want to make too much of it, but not seeing her labor, not seeing her limp around, seeing her still able to get the ball up, not be wrapped in bubble wrap, any of those things does make me optimistic that this is injury maintenance in a sense, or, getting it 100%, being cautious, as they said in the preseason, but applying it to the regular season in a favorable stretch of the schedule so that when Caitlin Clark does come back, we see the best version of Caitlin Clark and we don't have to worry about her going back on the shelf. And it seems to me that appears to be the case because clearly Caitlin Clark is not suffering in a sense where she can't move around. And this is I'm confident it's not a long-term injury. Let me put it that way. Probably all those words I just spit out, I can probably be summed up by I'm confident this is not a long-term injury. And I think the Indiana Fever can hold down the fort in Caitlin Clark's absence, considering all things. And the silver lining is you get to see how they work together and how they make things happen without the engine.